What happens to us after we die? Do we cease to exist? Or do we live on? This may be the biggest question that mankind has ever asked. Where do we go when we die? And who is there to greet us? And why? What exactly does it mean to become a spiritual person? Does it consist of following predetermined laws? Or is it a personal journey? These are the types of questions that we will discuss. Welcome to the Regression session. Welcome back to the Regression session. My name is Ian, and this week I'm honored to have Joanne DiMaggio on the show. Joanne is an internationally recognized researcher, teacher, author, and past life therapist who's published 6 books and hundreds of magazine articles about various topics regarding past life work, and has compiled an amazing amount of data about the subject. And as I said earlier, I couldn't be more ecstatic to have her on the show. If you've had a spiritual experience, or if you're a past life regression therapist, or if you have past life memories, or if you just want to come on the show to talk to me about what you think happens to us after we die, reach out to me. My email is theregressionsession@gmail.com. So let's jump into today's interview with Joanne. Hey, Joanne, thanks for coming on to the show.
I'm glad to be here. I've been looking forward to this, and I know we're going to have a lot of wonderful conversation.
I definitely agree with you. Just before we get into it, because I'm really excited to start talking to you, if you don't mind just telling my audience a little bit about your background and your education and you know, your books and everything like that.
Okay, well, let's see. I've been doing this work now for about 34 years. And I started becoming interested in reincarnation when I was a teenager. I grew up Catholic, and I went to 12 years of Catholic school, if you can believe that. And there were occasions throughout those years where I was questioning some Catholic beliefs, especially where sin was concerned. And a lot of it didn't make any sense to me. I thought, you know, how can you only get this one chance? What if you do something wrong and you don't realize it, you can't get to confession, and then you die and you go straight to hell? What kind of a loving God is that? So as a youngster, I was probably, you know, I think 7 when the first time I had those thoughts. Leading up into my teenage years. By the time I became a teenager, I started to do some research on my own into other beliefs and started reading books on esoteric topics. So I was reading books about Edgar Cayce, you know, the most renowned psychic of the 20th century, who later became, for me, my greatest teacher. I read books by Jess Stern, Ruth Montgomery, all of the big names back in the 70s and 80s. And in 1987, I should back up too, I also had a lot of what I call memory triggers growing up that were pointing me in the direction of the possibility of having had an 18th century life. And that's a story unto itself that I won't get into, but so the pump was being primed early on. In 1987, Shirley MacLaine's book Out on a Limb became a mini series on ABC. It was on for 2 nights. And I think that was the big wake up call for a lot of sleeping metaphysicians, because I instantly remembered my interest in metaphysical topics, specifically reincarnation. when I was a lot younger, because I had sort of dropped it, by the time I was in college. And then, I got married, had a family, lived a very mainstream life. And then along comes Shirley with this miniseries. And I was like, aha, there it is again. And I was just absolutely enthralled by that. So that year was 1987. I decided I needed to find some like-minded people. Where do you go when you have these beliefs and the majority of people around you, especially your own family, don't believe in any of this? So I heard about Edgar Cayce's ARE, Association for Research and Enlightenment, out in Virginia Beach, and I joined. And I also became involved in their chapter in the Chicago area, which is where I was living. And so they were bringing in a lot of speakers, a lot of past life therapists, researchers, others in the field. And so I decided to start my own past life research organization that same year, and I called it Plexus. It was operated in Naperville, Illinois, which is a suburb of Chicago. And so I just became more and more and more involved in the work and meeting people and networking with people, and started to study the Cayce readings. He has quite a bit about reincarnation in there. And then along the lines, I had a past life therapist, author, and speaker come to do a program for us. And I told him my story. And he said, Joanne, you know more about past life regression than 95% of the therapists out there. Why aren't you doing it? Because at that time, I wasn't doing it. I was hosting these programs and putting out newsletters and stuff like that, but I wasn't doing regression work. I was relying on other people to come in and do them, at our location. And I said, no, I'm a reporter for the universe. That's how I've always seen myself, that I've been a scribe for many, many lifetimes. And I'm just here to observe and to write about it and then to share that with the masses. And he says, oh, no, you were meant to do this work. So he badgered me for quite a few years. And then finally I went and I got my hypnotherapy certification through the Eastern Institute of Hypnotherapy. I studied with Dr. Irene Hickman, who was a pioneer in the area of hypnosis. I then went on years later and I got my master's in transpersonal studies, which is the equivalent of a master's degree in transpersonal psychology, and my spiritual mentor certification through Atlantic University. So I've been doing the work ever since and doing a lot of research projects, which then I turn into books. So I have 5 books out right now. Some are on soul writing, which was my thesis. Soul writing is a written form of meditation. And I do use soul writing in the regression process. And we can talk about that later if you like. So I've done a few on soul writing. I did a research project on how chronic illnesses can be traced to past life. That book's called Karma Can Be a Real Pain. And I did a book on the pre-life planning session. And then my most recent book was a biography of a boy who was 2 days old and had a reading from Edgar Cayce, who said he was the reincarnation of Alexander the Great and Thomas Jefferson, and that he could do for the world what Jefferson did for this country. So he made that prophecy he gave him in that reading. That was in 1936. And obviously, this individual did not live up to that. And I wanted to find out why. So I spent about 8 years researching his life. And the book that I wrote is Edgar Cayce and the Unfulfilled Destiny of Thomas Jefferson Reborn. So that's basically it. I do still have a private regression practice. I do regressions via Zoom and to a global audience. And I do a lot of speaking engagements. And but my heart is in writing, and my soul is in research. I love the whole research I don't know what you'd call it, the whole process of it, because then it enables me to share with an audience what other people, everyday people, average people have experienced in their regressions, so that it's not me pontificating, it's them telling their story. And that brings me enormous joy to be able to share that with people, because it's the real deal.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And you definitely know your stuff and you've been doing it for long enough. One thing that you mentioned that you mentioned memory triggers.
Mm-hmm.
And I know what you're talking about, I think, but would you be willing to just kind of define that a little bit for me?
Sure. Memory triggers are things that come up in your life that in a way don't make any sense, that you things that you resonate to, but you don't know why. So it would be if you, for instance, there's a certain place in the world that you're drawn to, and you go there almost every vacation, but you don't know why. You just can't get enough of this place. Or you even move, as I did. I moved from Chicago, where I grew up, and never felt like that was home. I ended up moving to Virginia, chasing a past life, of course, but that's another story. But Virginia felt like home to me, and Illinois, even though I was born and raised there, never did. It could be certain pieces of music that when you hear the music, it triggers a memory of some sort. It could be a deja vu experience. It could be architecture or clothing or a time period that, could be a mountainscape, a seascape, walking into a forest. You get these instantaneous feelings deep within you that either you've been there before or something important happened surrounding something similar to what you're experiencing. So for me, it was always the 18th century. I couldn't get enough of it. And it made no sense because I grew up in a blue collar neighborhood on the south side of Chicago. But all I cared about was Baroque music, writing with a feather pen or quill pen on parchment paper, of course. Watching period movies. I'd go to the library and I would get out books on Dolly Madison and Abigail Adams. I was just totally immersed. Even at Halloween, I'd want my mother to put my hair in ringlets and I'd have a long gown on. Those were all memory triggers that were given those prior to coming into our physical bodies. And they're intended to do exactly what it's called. It's a trigger. It'll ignite within you a memory. It could be very brief, and could be that you won't even pay attention to it, but it's there. And it's a memory of a prior lifetime, or it's a memory of somebody that you were with in a prior lifetime. So, if you meet somebody new and suddenly they feel familiar to you, that's a memory trigger. So it's really fascinating. And when I did my research project on the pre-life planning session, that was one of the questions I asked. If, when they were still in spirit before they came to the earth, what memory triggers were they given to help them remember their soul's journey?
That's fascinating. And it sounds like it's a lot more common than people realize. I mean, for me, even I feel drawn to the Stone Age or prehistoric stone hatchet wielding caveman kind of era. But I mean, I wouldn't want to give it up now because I have, all these things, the internet, but I feel drawn to that area of time. And I know tons of people have experienced that deja vu and things. So that's incredible that you were able to kind of narrow that down with your research. And I was actually going to ask you about the pre-life planning session, if that was a part of it. So did you find that out through regressing people and asking those questions then?
Well, I did a lot of research into Dr. Michael Newton's work, because he really is the pioneer on the life between lives work. But I found there were a lot of things that he had in his books that didn't sit well with me, that didn't feel right. And they didn't really go along with what the Casey teachings had stated. And as I said, I was a student of Casey, so I was really curious, excuse me, about this. I wanted to find out for myself. And so a lot of people encouraged me. They said, why don't you just do a research study of your own? And so that's what I did. I had about 25 to 30 volunteers come in. We first did a past life regression. I took them to the life that was most impacting them today. And then I brought them back into their current body, and then I backed them out again. So we went from who they are today into their younger years. They just kept getting younger and younger, into their childhood, into the womb, and then out again, so that they were in spirit immediately prior to this lifetime. And then I started asking questions about the afterlife. Questions like, what does it feel like to die? What is the afterlife? What's the path that you take to get to your spiritual home? What does that look like? Does anybody greet you? And questions about meeting up with the Council of Elders to go over their karmic issues and their karmic attributes, and to state what is their soul's purpose going to be in this life, and then why did they choose their mother and their father, what members of their soul family agreed to come in with them in this life, and why, what role are they playing. And then the question about the memory triggers. There's also a question in there about why they chose the body that they have now. So a lot of that work was building on what Dr. Newton had already put into motion, but I took it a step further and wanted to really, test out some of the conclusions that he came up with. Ended up being a little different than what the people I was working with were telling me. For instance, he said that nobody that he had worked with had ever seen anybody on the Council of Elders as being a religious or biblical character. And yet almost every one of mine did, from Jesus to Moses to Mary Magdalene to the angel Michael. It was and Mother Mary. So there were a lot of differences between his conclusions and mine, and I wanted to document that, and that's what that book, I Did It to Myself Again, is all about.
And when you documented that, did you notice any correlation with the current religion that the person was practicing, or the religion that they had grown up with, and seeing these biblical characters? And to add on to that, did you work with anybody who was kind of outside of the Christian faith that saw other deities or other figures of other scripture?
That question, I never asked them before going into this, what were their religious beliefs. So whether they were Christian or Jewish or Muslim, I did not know that. And nobody in these sessions ever brought that up. Nobody brought up religion at all. Obviously, the ones I would think, if seeing Jesus, they may have been Christian. I know one in particular burst into tears because she couldn't believe that Jesus was one of the guidance counselors for her, so to speak. Some of them came up with really odd characters as well, and they weren't all human on the council. Some of them were like animal totems. Some of them were sort of silly characters, like like the little boy that stuck his thumb. What was his name? Tom Thumb. Put his thumb in the dike. One said that one of their guidance counselors looked like Jack in the Box. Some of it was really off the wall, but the majority of them described angelic type beings, radiating a light. A lot of them saw the typical old men with gray hair and beards with the robes on, and so it was all different. And I did chronicle all of that in the book. Everyone that's in there, the transcript from their session is in there as well. So you could read about the different entities that they saw in their council, in the council chamber for them, that had come there to help them work on their next life.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll post a link to that book for anybody who wants to read it, as well as your other work. The reason that I was asking the question is because I've heard, and across my research and across talking to multiple people, as far as like near-death experiences and past life memories and life between life regression memories and things like that, a common theme that I've just kind of noticed is that for me personally, when I've done this kind of thing, like the life between life regressions, I've seen that they kind of will describe these beings, and then it's almost like they're just describing something that they can relate to. They're just like for me personally, when I do it, they're like, it's hard to describe. It's like so and so, right? It's like they have a beard, they have this. I think, it's they're giving an approximation. So the reason that I was asking is if in your opinion, would you think that it's their brain trying to process what they're seeing and just kind of relating it to a character they may be familiar with?
I think so, because a lot of them would say to me that they were seeing energies. They were not able to see a face. They were not able to discern whether it was male or female or androgynous. A lot of them said that initially they would see 12. The other day I had a client who said she saw 12 purple lights separate, and then they all gelled into one. Some people were upset a little bit when I would ask that question, especially if I asked if there was any color surrounding these energies, because Dr. Newton made a big deal about color. And they all said, what difference does that make? That's a silly question. Let's move on. So my group did not talk about color so much. And like I said, those that were able to describe them, I would ask them, we're going to go from left to right. How many do you see? And then I would say, are they presenting as male, female, or androgynous? And then most of the time, that question they could answer. Then I would say, do they share their name with you? And then they would sometimes say it, and sometimes no. They would say no. Okay, what appearance do they have? And they'd say, well, she's got long red hair, wearing a white toga, like has some flowers in her hair, has beautiful blue eyes. Sometimes I would get very detailed descriptions like that. And other times, I had one who said, it looks like a whale to me. And I thought, a whale? Why are you saying it's a whale? And it's because she was attracted to the water. This was like, for her, that was her comfort place, was to be in the water. So, whether she manufactured that or that was her comfort zone, I don't know, because I don't judge as we're going through this, and I don't say, oh, that can't possibly be. I let them say whatever it is that comes into their minds. Because in the end, it doesn't really matter. It's the input that they're getting from this energy that's presenting itself to them, in terms of the advice that they're being given, the counseling they're given, the guidance that they're being given. That's what really matters. But just out of curiosity, I did want to know what they look like, and if they were male or female or androgynous. So yeah, they were pretty much all over the place.
That's really fascinating to me, because when I do my regression to people, I always tell people that it's very important for them to not try to dissect what's happening to them in the moment, and just kind of watch it like it's a movie or a play or something like that.
Right.
Yeah, because if you try to analyze it, then it's just going to interfere with what's happening. And with these beings in the pre-life planning session, or the life between life, or whatever you'd like to refer to it as, the descriptions sound a lot a lot like my experience with spirit guides. And
Hmm.
I warned you beforehand that I was going to bring this up, but in every single session that I've ever done, there's been some kind of a spirit guide, and their descriptions are completely just wildly different. There's like almost no similarities between any of them. Um, have you experienced the spirit guides in your sessions?
Not in the regression sessions, but absolutely in the soul writing sessions I have. Matter of fact, I have 9 different guides that I work with when I do the soul writing, and they each have um, somewhat of a different personality. They come in. The one that comes in is dependent on the question that I'm asking. I have seen them only twice in my life. Both times I was in a crisis situation, and I saw them. They refer to themselves as a Council of 9, and they're with me all the time. If I go to take a walk, one of them usually comes with me because I can hear him. He's a jokester. He makes me laugh. Imagine I'm walking all by myself and all of a sudden I burst out laughing. I always hope I don't run into anybody because they'll think I'm absolutely crazy. But that's what soul writing is all about. It's connecting with your guide who's waiting for you, has been waiting for you to communicate, and asking questions of spirit. It's like a 24/7 hotline. People, and I've done some research in this as well with volunteers. Um, you know, I equate it to, when you're first coming to the earth, you're like a little kid going off to school, and you've got your backpack and your little soul's all ready to come to the earth and have that experience as a spiritual being in a human body. And your source or your guide or whoever is talking to you before you leave says, now wait a minute, when you get down to the earth plane, you may run into some trouble, you may have some questions, or you may be in a situation in which you have questions and there's nobody there that satisfactorily answers those questions. You could go to your family, you could go to your minister or your friends or whoever, and you're talking this through and you're not getting any answers. Well, we're going to give you this 24/7 phone home card, and whenever you need, there's always somebody at the other end of the line who will talk to you and answer your question. So the whole premise behind soul writing is, what if you knew, really, really knew, that any question that you had, there is an answer, but you just need to tune in and ask, because your guides are there waiting for you to ask the question. So with soul writing, that's what you learn to do. You learn to plug in and ask questions and get answers. And you could apply this to any part of your life. It's a significant tool for soul writing. As a matter of fact, my second book, Your Soul Remembers, Accessing Your Past Lives Through Soul Writing, goes into great depth about doing that. Now, this is not automatic writing. I really want to stress this because people get them too confused. There is a difference between them, and I outline that in my book, both of those books. But I have found that when I attach it to the end of a regression session, it provides the backstory that they may have missed in the session, or it gives them guidance. In other words, they'll say, well, this is all well and good, Joanne, but what the heck do I do with this information? Well, you could get the answer through soul writing. So it can be applied to many, many areas. It can deepen your psychic development. It's really meant for soul's growth. But the idea is that you do have a connection to a divine source of wisdom. And you can have a conversation through the writing if you choose to. You can do it other ways too, but that's the method that I teach that I find so very, very powerful. Edgar Cayce taught it. He called it inspirational writing. So it is a means of channeling. So you are getting in touch with your your guides that way, or you could think it could be source, it could be the creator, it could be an angel, or your higher self, whatever you want to call it. But that to me is very important. The one lesson everybody got out of the soul writing research project was that they're not alone, that they're never alone, that there's always somebody there to help them, some energy, some entity, or whatever, who's, like with the Catholic Church, they taught us about guardian angels. That was so comforting to me as a child to know that, God had given me this one particular angel, and all that angel was supposed to do was watch out for me. So our guides do the same thing, and having a conversation with them and knowing that they're there is extremely comforting. And, it really alleviates loneliness, because you understand, I'm not alone in this. I'm not here all by myself on this planet. I've got some help from above. So yeah, I'm a big believer in spirit guides and in the tremendous work that they do on our behalf.
I was actually going to ask you about the soul writing and the versus automatic writing. So it's great that you pointed out that they were different. I have tried automatic writing one time, and I just don't know if it works or not. So how can you tell whether or not you're actually channeling your spirit guide in soul writing versus going into automatic writing?
Well, with automatic writing, there's usually no prayer or white light protection that's used prior to starting the writing. Your hand moves by itself. It's like it's not in your control. You're getting messages from a singular source, like that uses the word I am here. I am telling you what to do. You are compelled to do something. You are commanded to do something. And it's not always for your highest and best. And you don't know ahead of time what you're writing. The writing just, it just comes, and there it is. And the handwriting is usually different than your own writing. With soul writing, you always, always, always say a prayer of protection and surround yourself with white light before you begin. You get a message that's the collective consciousness. So it's coming in as we are with you in love and in light. The message, the handwriting is the same. You are in total control. You know what's coming before it hits the paper. Maybe not way in advance, but a few words ahead. So you kind of sit back and just watch the writing proceed on its own. But you have control over your hand. In other words, I skipped. One time I got really cocky about all this, and I thought, I'm not going to do all this. I'm not going to say the prayer. I'm not going to surround myself with the white light. I'm just going to jump right in. And I got into trouble. I could feel a difference in my arm that there, because what Edgar Cayce warned about was that there are low-level energies, lower frequencies, and they're trying to get in. And if you don't surround yourself with that white light and say that prayer of protection, they'll have an in. And if they have an in, then there's the concern about possession. As a matter of fact, the ARE has listed automatic writing, I think, is the number one no when it comes to your soul or psychic development. I think the Ouija board is number 2. These are things that they don't recommend. There's case studies of people who have gotten themselves into trouble doing automatic writing and have felt that they were possessed by an entity of some sort. So we don't, and also with the soul writing, you're never forced to do something or told you have to do this or you're compelled to do this. It's gentle nudging of your soul. It's advice. It's with love. You could feel the difference between the two. Now, I think a lot of people are doing soul writing, but they're calling it automatic writing because they don't know that there's a difference. When Edgar Cayce was writing about this, he was writing about it in the 20s and 30s, 40s, and he called it inspirational writing. And when I started to do my thesis on this topic, when I would put inspirational writing in, like if you're on Amazon and you type in inspirational writing, you're going to get all Christian genre books. If you type in automatic writing, you're going to get all books on the occult. So I thought, well, neither one of these is what Casey had in mind. So I thought, well, could I call it something else? And that's why I started calling it soul writing. But that's what it is. It's a written form of meditation, but it does rely on meditation. You have to go into a meditative state in order to do it. And in that meditative state, you do say that prayer of protection. You do surround yourself with white light. That keeps you safe. Because if you're doing the automatic writing, I've had some people say that they're getting message that whoever they're writing with is swearing at them, using 4-letter words. It just doesn't feel right at any level. So I tell them you have to stop, start again, and strengthen that white light protection and re-say that prayer, and then go again. So with that in mind, the classes that I've taught on doing soul writing, we haven't had anybody really get into any kind of trouble with it. And most people could do it the first time out. It's not something you need a special skill for. And so I do have there's about 12 steps that I tell people when they're first getting started on how to do that. And that's in my book on soul writing. And it's wonderful because, like I said, you can apply it to every part of your life. It doesn't have to be, you could use it for, art, for writing music. It's just a fabulous tool. I think out of everything I learned from Edgar Casey, this is the most valuable.
Yeah, that is incredible. It truly is. So I have a couple of questions for you regarding this. So my first thing is I have heard of those lower vibrational entities, and actually I don't know if you've done any research into astral projection or not, but a lot of the time when people start to astral project, these entities will be there trying to scare them. So I know that they do exist, and I've accidentally interacted with them a couple of times back when I didn't really know what I was doing.
Yeah, me too.
And it's not fun. It's really scary. But my question for you about the protection, and this is kind of a selfish question for me. A little bit of background about the context for this question is I actually have aphantasia. Are you aware of what that is?
No.
It's the inability to visualize in your own mind. So
okay.
Like I don't hear my own voice in my head. If I close my eyes, and I always use this example, try to imagine or see an apple, it's just dark. I can't physically imagine things. So with this white light protection, do you have people visualize with that? And if so, how would someone go about doing that if they can't visualize?
Well, I tell them to imagine a translucent golden shield of light, iridescent light, surrounding them like they're in a bubble. So, I ask them if they could see themselves in this bubble. But while I'm saying it to them, I'm also projecting that around them too. So it's coming from me to them. And then I say the prayer of protection on behalf of both of us. So I say that prayer out loud, and that covers both of us. So if the white light shield, if they can't see it, if they can't see themselves floating around in a bubble of light, the fact that I've projected that onto them, I think covers them. But I think that prayer, since it is on behalf of both of us and they're hearing me say the words, that covers them as well.
Okay. So if I was to do it alone, then the visualization would probably be necessary then.
Well, either the visualization or else if you could write a prayer of your own, a prayer of protection, in which you write that out and then just say that out loud. I am surrounded by a translucent golden shield of light, in which nothing can penetrate and I'm safe. if you say those words, it's the same as the visualization. So the people that come to me who are visual, however, it benefits them to be able to see that shield around them, to feel safe within it. But certainly just verbalizing it would have as much of an impact as seeing it.
Right. I definitely can see that. I kind of am of the opinion that you're gonna find what you're looking for the most part. So if you're out there looking for a positive experience and you're only looking to attract positivity, that's generally what you're gonna find.
Right.
But I was just asking that for selfish reasons, obviously. What's interesting is that in my what I've started doing recently with people is, I don't know how much you look into, or you've looked into, like chakra systems or the concept of chakras, but I find that fascinating. And what I've done is something similar. I have people visualize going down into the center of their torso, which is where what they call the solar plexus is, and that's like the energy center of the body. It's by your stomach. That's where your energy comes from. And I'll have people visualize their own energy, and just kind of describe what that looks like, get comfortable with it, and then I'll have them take that energy and imagine it expanding around them in something, in the form of something that makes them feel safe. So, because I've had a few things happen where I'm not going to get into it because I've talked about it way too much into the show, but I had a little girl come through that told me that she wasn't one of my clients' past lives and that she wanted to talk to me. And so that's why I have my clients kind of.
I had that. Yeah.
You've had that too?
I had a similar experience. Yeah.
Yeah, it was creepy.
It was creepy. For me too. Yeah.
Yeah, I've not run into anybody else who's had that happen. And since then, I've had people expand that energy out around them, and they can actually, for the most part, feel almost like a heat above their skin that's more than just their body heat.
Oh yes.
So it's real, and they can feel it, and they feel safe in it. And I just try to imagine me giving them some of my energy for protection. But I'm interested now that you brought that up, if you're willing to talk about it, what happened, because I've never had anybody else have that.
Well, I had a woman come to me, and she did warn me ahead of time about this entity that visited her, but she came for a regression, and I didn't think this was going to be an issue, so I agreed to do it. And the movie Exorcist.
Yeah,
she could have been Linda Blair. I mean, I fully expected her head to just go completely around in circles, because her whole body contorted, and she just her hands became like claws, and her eyes, they rolled back in her head, and her voice, everything about her changed, and she just became evil incarnate, where she was just this entity or whatever it was that was in her. We never got anywhere near doing a regression, because this one wanted complete control and called her a little piggy, and talked in this really sinister voice, like, "You are a little piggy, aren't you?" I mean, I was really, I wasn't afraid, because I had done the protection, but I couldn't get rid of it. And I realized then that I was way out of my element, because I know that there are people, wonderful, wonderful practitioners who specialize in attached entities. And I wasn't one. I did study that under Dr. Irene Hickman, but it just was not my thing. And so she just would not allow the client to have this regression. So I tried to bring her out of it, and it took a lot of work, because this energy was not going to relinquish control. And so I just kept urging her, to come back, come back, come back, and to get rid of this energy. And finally she did. Because I never did do the regression with her, and I didn't charge her for it either, because I thought I just want her out of my office. And then after that, had to do a really serious cleansing of my space. And she was very belligerent afterwards with me, the client was. So, you run that risk when you do this work, because you just don't know who's going to walk through your door. Although now since COVID, I don't see clients in person anymore. But that was a rare, out of all the years I've done this, I've only had one or two that were like that. The rest of them were very cooperative, very kind, loving, caring people who really, really wanted to do some healing work with the regression. So, but you can run into situations like that, and you need to just be aware of it and be prepared for it. So I hope that never happens again, because it really shook me up quite a bit.
That's so creepy, Joanne.
Yeah, it was creepy. Yeah.
I don't ever want that to happen to me. I've had it happen twice, I think. One was the little girl, and she was just right in the middle of the session. She was like, "Ian," and I was like, "Yes," and she was like, "I don't think I'm one of Taylor's past lives," and I was like, okay, well, what are you then? Are you like and she interrupted me and she said, "A ghost," and I was like, "Oh my God."
Oh gosh.
And I was like, "Well, why are you here?" And she said, "I was invited here," and I said, "Well, no, you weren't. We didn't invite you here." But the thing was, is Taylor's spirit guide was there, kind of monitoring the whole thing. And that little girl was the one that told me that you're pretty much just going to find what you're looking for the most part. But she did say, and this really creeped me out, that there are things out there that try to get you, that try to chase you, and she's had to run away from them before. And that really creeped me out.
Yeah, it makes you feel sorry for her. It makes you feel like you want to help her out. And what's she doing? Just kind of running around in the halls of spirit. Somebody needs to rescue that soul.
Yeah, and I was just like so shocked. I didn't know what to do. I just told her to reach out to a guide and stuff. But, I've talked about that so many times on my show just because it was just so strange. The second one was a guy who I was regressing my brother, and his whole complexion and personality changed. He started talking in a southern drawl like this, and he was. I said, "Okay, well, what's your name?" He's like, "Well, my name's." He's like, "Don't laugh," and I said, "I won't laugh." And he said, "My name's Breck Stevens, and I'm from Louisville, Kentucky." And I said, "Well, it's nice to meet you." And he said, "It's nice to meet you too. And I know your name's Ian." And I was like, "What?" And at that point, I kind of knew that it wasn't a past life of my brother, because he's like, "Well, I know your name's Ian," and I was like, "Oh no,
oh goodness,
what's happening?" So that's so strange.
I had a client who went into a very heavy French accent. I know some past life therapists claim that they've had clients who start speaking the language that they spoke in their previous life. I've never had that, but I have had people who assume an accent of that country. So this woman started having this very deep French accent, and I knew she was struggling because there were times when she would stop and she'd go, "How do you say it?" And she's struggling to find the word in English when she was born and raised here. So, so it was real interesting to me to hear her speak like that. And that's happened only a handful of times as well. So a lot of these things that are really more on the paranormal end of it, they don't happen that often. That's not the norm for sure. And at least not in my work in the 30 something years I've been doing it, but they do happen. And that's why it's very important for people, when you're seeking out a regression practitioner or therapist, that you do a little bit of research on that person, have a conversation, make sure you've got a good rapport with them, but also make sure that they've done their homework and that they have been have worked on their own past lives, first of all, and then also that that they have the background, the education, so that you feel comfortable, so that if you do get into a situation that could be potentially harmful to you, that they'll know what to do, that they'll stay calm and cool and collected and know how to deal with any of these renegade entities that may pop up in a session. But like I said, it does not happen often at all. So I don't want anybody to become afraid and think, I don't want to do this because I don't want any strange voices coming out of my body. No, that's generally not what happens.
Yeah, and ever since I've started doing the energy projection visualization, it hasn't happened not even one time.
There you go.
So, yeah, so I would agree with that it's the exception rather than the rule. That's just it's so fascinating that to finally run into somebody else that kind of we're kind of on the same wavelength with this, because you said something.
We are.
You said something about doing your research and finding someone who essentially cares about doing it the right way. I made an episode about this, about what the things I think that people should look out for and look for in a regression therapist. And I brought it up to another practitioner that I had on the show, and the person was kind of like, well, what do you mean? And I was like, well, not everybody necessarily cares about that kind of stuff, about that side of things. And they were just like, well, you need to embrace all that stuff. And I said, no, you don't. No, you don't. And so they kind of got in an argument with me about it. So I'm really glad that you, who's been doing this for, a long time and really know your stuff, that you agree and can back me up on this, that it's important to find somebody who kind of knows what they're doing, first of all, and then will take the time to make sure that you're fully back in your own body or consciousness or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. That's why it's important that past life therapists or practitioners, they say, physician heal thyself, or healer heal thyself, that you've done the work yourself, that all aspects of it, and that you know what to do when a person becomes emotionally overwhelmed by what they're seeing in the regression. I don't know. I'm sure you've had clients who've been distraught over something. They'll just start sobbing.
Yeah.
I've had, and I tell people that's actually a good thing, because I cannot make you cry. I cannot make you laugh unless I tell you a joke, which I don't do. I cannot make you do anything in a regression session that you wouldn't normally do. So if it's touching an emotion, that's a sign that it's a memory and it's real. It's the real thing. You're not making it up, because everybody comes in and says, well, I'm pretty sure I'm going to make this up, or I'm worried I'm going to make it up. And then, after the session, I'll say, well, what do you think? Do you think you made that up? And nobody ever says that they think they made it up at that point. But what I also tell them is this, would you deliberately be at home and think about a story that you were going to tell me in this regression, and then you're going to, at the time when I was seeing people, in person, you're going to get in your car, you're going to drive to my office, you're going to spend 2 hours with me, you're going to tell me this story, and then you're going to pay me for having listened to your story. Is that how this works? And of course they'll say, oh, no. I said, well, then there you go. The question about, did I make it up, about imagination, that comes up almost always. People are always concerned about that. But I think if they're in the hands of a competent regressionist, somebody that, like I said, has worked on their own past lives, that has had more experience than a weekend training session, certification session, because that's what's happening. There's a lot of, and I took one of those sessions too, those weekend certifications. But I don't think after 2 or 3 days, you should then hang your shingle out that says you're doing this work, because this is sacred work, and it requires knowledge on multiple levels. So you really have to know how the universe works. And you have to have the experience of dealing with people from all walks of life, some of whom are coming to you and they're broken and they're really in need of kind, caring, healing work. So you have to care about people. You have to really want to know their story, help them to remember that story, because they can if they're given the right tools. I tell everybody, this is your birthright. All this information is stored in your soul. You could pull it up at any time. You can go to the Akashic records and pull it out if you need be, but this information is in your soul, and your soul knows which lifetime to show you. So just trust, just get out of the way and let this come up. Tell me the first impression that you have, no matter how ridiculous you may think it sounds, because I'm sure with you as well, we've heard it all. Nothing is going to surprise me or shock me, and I'm not going to judge. That's not my role. My role is not to say, boy, you really screwed up in that lifetime, didn't you? Those words would never come out of my mouth, except they just did for you. But you know what I'm saying? That's not the role that we play. We're a guide. I don't do readings. A lot of times I'll get people say, I'd like a past life reading from you. I said, I don't do readings. I'm not going to spoon feed this information to you. And even if I could, I wouldn't. This information is for you to discover on your own. So a lot of people will say to me, well, I went to a psychic and the psychic told me this, or this about my past life. And I said, does that ring true for you? Because remember that a medium or a psychic or somebody, even the most gifted among them, that information is being filtered through them to you. Why don't you just go directly to the source? Why do you entrust this information, to other people when you can do it yourself? It's in your soul. You have the right to obtain that information. You've got guides who are willing to help you with it. There are all kinds of tools that you could use to get this information. And it would be much more impactful for you if you did the work yourself. But, some people want a roadmap. They don't really want to do the work. They want you to tell them who they were, what they did, whatever. And I don't do that. I don't provide that to them as a psychic would or a reader would. So, when you say you're a past life therapist, it's therapy in the truest sense of the word. And it's being a practitioner, implies you've done the work, you've studied, you've interned. And over the years, as you've accumulated more and more sessions with people, you've gained the experience that only really time can provide for you. Plus, you may have done it yourself in other lifetimes. This may just be a continuation, of your own gifts that you brought in with you into this life. So I just tell people, be cautious before you jump into something like this. But then be confident once you do with the person that you're working with. Develop a rapport with them so you feel that they truly do understand what you're experiencing and what you're seeing. Because when I do regressions with people, I see what they're seeing. I go along with them so that I can see the bigger picture and I can ask the bigger question. Because sometimes when they're in the middle of the session, they're just so overwhelmed with what they're doing. They're processing, that they fail to see the bigger picture or move on to the next significant event in that life. So we act as guides, enabling them to continue to move forward and to bring up those memories that are, unfinished business that they brought in with them into this lifetime.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you. For the people who are worried about, am I making this up? You would have to be a Hollywood level actor to fake that kind of emotion.
That's true.
I've had people just completely break down and just sob. And I've had people who were like macho men who came in almost because of like a dare from their significant other,
Oh,
come in and be like, oh yeah, nothing's gonna happen, and then they were just sobbing because they were remembering a life of being an abused woman. So
yes,
it's
yes.
just you'd have to be a Hollywood level actor to make that up. And yeah, I really appreciate you saying all the stuff that I totally agree with. Being confident and stuff like that, and caring. Even after the experience I have, I still feel like there's more to learn. I feel like
Oh,
I'll
yeah.
never stop learning. There's just so
Oh,
much
yeah.
to learn and so much to experience. So, um,
Mm.
thanks for going over that. If you'd like to include your website for your books and your services and your blog and all that stuff, if you'd like to talk about that, you're more than welcome to.
Oh, thank you. Well, it's JoanneDiMaggio.com, JoanneDimaggio.com. And I have a list of the various books that I have written. There are 5 of them on there right now. You can order those through Amazon. That's probably the best way to get them. So there's a picture of the book cover and then a description of the book. My services are listed. I offer several different types of past life regressions. I offer a traditional regression. I offer one with the soul writing at the end of it. I do a physical karma regression. This is the one that I used when I did my research on my book on chronic conditions having their source in a prior lifetime. And then the Life Between Life research project, and then this new book about Edgar Cayce and Thomas Jefferson Reborn. Also, you can book a session, a soul writing session as well, and or past life regression, right on my website. I have a calendar there, appointment calendar. You can see when I'm available. My sessions are anywhere from 1.5 to 3 hours. And then you could pay for them online as well. I have a blog, so you could read articles that have appeared in my monthly newsletter. You could sign up for my monthly newsletter. I always have a soul writing message in there and something about reincarnation in each issue, as well as a list of my upcoming speaking engagements. There's a fun test you could take on my website to help you decide which regression session would be best for you. And I have some questions and answers, common questions and answers. There's a list of all of my media appearances, and anybody that wants to book me for a conference talk, there's information there as well. And then there's some case studies on there. You could read about real people and the kinds of sessions they had, and then what came of them afterwards. How did that impact their life? So it's really jam-packed with a lot of information, and I just recently had it redone, so I think I'm really proud of it. So I hope that your listeners will take the time to explore it.
Yeah, me too. It looks great, and there's definitely going to be a link to that in the description. And before we end the episode tonight, I always ask this question to everybody I have on the show, or at least I try to. So, Joanne, what do you think happens to us after we die?
We go back to spirit, and we have an opportunity to review the lifetime that we just completed. We work with a group of wise ascended beings, masters, called the Council of Elders, who help us to plan the next life so that we pick a issue from the previous life that we want to work on in the next lifetime. And then we spend our time planning that out. We pick our parents, we have a reunion with our members of our soul family. These are people that have traveled with us lifetime after lifetime after lifetime. And, we go through everything that I wrote about it, and I did it to myself again. The whole process of very painstakingly figuring out what would be the next best life for us to live. What issues do we want to work on? So it's like going, going to your guidance counselors at school and planning your curriculum for the next semester. And so I think that that's what we do between lifetimes. I think we're planning our studies for the next semester, and then when we're ready, we pop back into a body and we start over again in the human condition. So I really believe that in the depths of my soul, and from what everybody has told me in all my research projects. So they say dying is easier than being born. So I think it's not that I'm looking forward to it, but I don't have the fear that I had before doing this incredible work with people.
Well, that's a wonderful answer. Thank you so much. And I really can't thank you enough for coming on to my show.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. I've enjoyed every moment of it. Thank you for inviting me.
That's it for today's episode. I'd like to extend a warm thank you to Joanne for coming onto the show, and I'd like to thank you for tuning in. If you like the show, I would appreciate you subscribing in your podcast player, as well as sharing the show around to your friends and anybody who you think might be interested, or even someone who might be interested in coming on to the show. If you're interested in coming onto the podcast and talking with me about your experiences, shoot me an email. My email is theregressionsession@gmail.com, and I would love to have you on the show.